Welcome back, everybody, and happy Tuesday evening. We will go straight to Senator Ruston.
Oh, right. I better get myself organised, haven't I? Could I have the birthday girl? Yeah, where's your present, Chiz? Hi there. I'm just wondering how many RAC facilities saw a reduction in their star rating over the last quarter?
The department
Does that do that?
does that. So
Okay. Right, well, stay there. Hopefully one of these questions will go to you because I don't want you to go home empty-handed on your birthday.
Just give me a moment to get the right data for you,
Sure.
Senator.
While we're all getting on the right page, Ms Heffron Webb, if you'd like to write down your favourite question, we can ask it later.
Do not ask her. If she gave it to you, we probably wouldn't want to know the answer.
might not be PG enough for Senator Smith.
I'll vet it.
So I can tell you the breakdown of star ratings as at May 26th, which was the latest
Yep.
update, and then I'll see if
Yep.
I can reflect that in terms of a percentage change.
Yep.
We had 6% of homes with a 5-star rating, 72% of homes with a 4-star rating, 22% of homes with a 3-star rating, and less than 1% of homes with a 1 or 2-star rating overall.
Okay. What do you need to do? I mean, if you've only got 6% of your homes with a 5-star rating, that's a very low percentage of overall. I mean, why? I mean, normally you would think that there would be more than just 6% of something met the high quality standard. I mean, has there been any reconsideration as to whether the star ratings are adequately reflecting like the perception that exists in people's minds around star ratings? Because people think about star ratings as they relate to, you know, to hotels or to Michelin restaurants or the like, and they have an expectation about a quality band. If you've only got 6% in the 5-star rating, has any consideration been given as to why you're only getting 6? And I suppose the question then goes back to my original question: what has the change been over the time that the star rating system's been in place? Are we seeing more go into the 5-star, or is there a reduction, or is it about the same?
I think my sense is broadly that it's improving. We have more in the 3 and 4-star.
No, the 5-star I'm talking about.
Let me see if I can find that for you. Definitely, as a general improvement, but in terms of the percentage of 5-star.
So you're saying the ones that were really bad have uplifted, but not, you can't give me the information as to those that have been good, that have actually taken that leap to be really high quality.
So my colleagues just helped me with the comparison from February of this year, so February 2026 to May.
Yep.
And in terms of the overall star rating, there was a slight increase in 5-star, so 1% increase in the number of providers with a 5.
So there was only 5% last time?
There was actually a reduction in the number of people with a 4-star rating, a 9%.
Sorry, so just go through. So in February?
In February?
There was 5% at 5-star?
So look, that would be correct. It's the figure I've got in front of me is it's improved by 1% since February. The figure for 4 stars has gone down by 9%.
So it was 81?
That sounds correct. The figure for 3 stars has gone up by 8%.
So that's to 30. Oh, so that was only 14%.
And no change to the 1 and 2 star ratings overall.
So you'd have to suggest from that that homes are going backwards.
I'd suggest, Senator, well, there is a mix. Some have gone from 4 to 3 and some have gone from 4 to 5 would be the predominant move.
Yeah, there's not very many that have gone from 4 to 5. You're talking about a 1% increase in the 5 star. You're talking about, would you say it was a 9% decrease in
4 star.
4 star and a 8% increase. So that's where your changes come about. So it's basically just been a drop from 4 star to 3 star. Do you know what was the predominant factor for that change?
So I'm just trying to think. I'm looking at the data in front of me and the maths I can't do fast enough in my head for you. I think the staffing rating, we saw a decrease in the number of homes with 3 star and almost an equal sort of splitting out, some moving down and some moving up.
Sorry, can you just unpack? So in terms of the staffing, you saw what exactly?
So we saw a reduction in the number of homes with a 3 star rating and an increase in all 4 other ratings. So had some homes that were going up the scale and some homes that were going down the scale.
Okay, so just in layman's terms,
Yeah.
was there an improvement in the number of homes that were meeting their staffing requirements?
So we had 240 well, sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm going to use this data correctly for you. We had 634 homes fewer with a 3 star rating. We had
640 fewer homes with a 3 star rating.
We had an increase in the number of homes that had a 1 star and a 2 star rating, but also an increase in the number of homes that had a 4 star and a 5 star
as it related
rating,
to staffing.
as it relating to staffing.
Okay, so what was if that's the case, then staffing wasn't the predominant factor for why you've seen such a dramatic move from from 4 stars to 3 stars? Because an 8 or 9% shift is a pretty big shift in the space of 3 months.
It is.
It is.
And the other measure that changed was the quality rating, and we saw in that an increase in homes at the 1, 2 and 3 star level and a reduction in homes at the 4 and 5 star
Well, maybe
level.
I could go, maybe this is your time to shine. So what are you seeing? Because, I mean, an overall reduction in the star ratings of a drop of 8 or 9% from 4 star to 3 star and little change in the other 2 suggests there's something going on there. What is your analysis of why this has happened?
Senator, I think it's a few things coming together. I think I'm right in saying this is the first time that the staffing rating has the care minutes has impacted on the staffing, on the rating. So I think that is a factor. I think the quality rating obviously comes from the quality indicators. There's a mixed story in the quality indicators. So there is improvements on some matters, like hospitalisations and other matters like that, but there's also some areas where there's a bit of deterioration. So really, I think you have to kind of drill in. We're now, as you know, undertaking conformance audits of all resi care homes under the new standards, and we are finding that most places have at least one or two areas of minor non-conformance, and some have areas of major non-conformance. So I think I think it's hard to say we've seen a drop in performance. I think our measurement of it is getting a bit more sophisticated. I think there's been a big change in the system and in the legislation, so there might be a bit of settling in as well in the data. But we will obviously be watching closely and identifying trends in terms of what we see out on the ground to kind of help build a richer picture than we can get just from the quality indicators and other data like that.
Yeah.
And I think possibly two contextual things. Sorry, now that I'm getting my head in the game, Senator. Ms Heffron-Reb is right that this is the first round of ratings that we've published since the increased expectations around the staffing rating were introduced. But I can also give you a comparison of that May 26 update to what we had in December 22 to give you a more longitudinal sense of what the trend is.
Look, I'm sort of... If you had data that was the previous quarter, but let's not go back to 2022, there's so much has happened in that period of time. I'm not sure that there would be anything that would be useful in that. But if you had if you've given me February and May, if you've got November...
I don't think I have November on me, Senator.
Yeah. So I'm just interested, I mean, is allied health provided in any way in residential care, and apart from as an external input? Does it have any impact at all in relation to the quality indicators in aged care?
So there is a quality indicator that relates to allied health, yes.
And is that where is that in the star rating system?
I'll need to double check that one for you, Senator.
I could jump in.
Yeah, sorry.
Victoria Angel, the Acting Assistant Secretary in Quality and Assurance Division. So our allied health quality indicator currently doesn't feed into the star rating system.
Is there any requirement for resi care providers to provide access to allied health?
Senator, I think it's not expressed as a requirement to provide. It's expressed as part of their meeting their clinical standard. That includes providing support for re-enablement, etc., which would be, allied health would be a key part of that. So we would expect that allied health is offered to people depending on their individual needs, obviously, and, you know, what their sort of set of circumstances is. But the new standards have a big emphasis on re-enablement, and, you know, people like physios and OTs and speech pathologists are really critical in that area. So, yeah, it's an outcomes-based measurement, I guess, is where we're looking at the whole clinical support of the older person. So,
you talk about re-enable it. Is it also part of preventative?
Absolutely. Particularly, obviously, in the supported home context. But yes.
Sure. So, since Care Minutes came into being, have allied health services in aged care homes reduced?
We wouldn't have that data QFR team.
We might need to ask some colleagues to come and help us with that aspect of it, Senator.
All right. Just going to program 3.2, which obviously is aged care services. Performance measure 3.2b. older Australians receive residential care services that contributes to their quality of life. And for the 25-26 year, there are there are a number of performance results, but one of them says all non-exempt residential aged care facilities of approved providers have at least one RN on site and on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it says that that target is at risk. So what is the, there seems to be a lot of at-risk measures in aged care, so I'm just wondering what is your response to how you rectify that at-risk measure that relates to one of the fundamental care minute requirements or the care requirements?
Might ask my colleagues who look after the 24/7 nursing measures to help you with that one, Senator.
We haven't got the allied health one yet.
I can speak briefly to the allied health minutes as well. Senator, the care minutes requirement started in the second quarter of 23-24. Yep. At that time, allied health minutes were tracking at 4.86 minutes per resident. The latest data for quarter 2 of this year is 4.77, so there's been a small decrease.
Okay. Decrease. So there's been a decrease despite the fact that Ms Heffron Webb has just given us evidence to say that she's particularly focused on making sure that the quality standards are focused on prevention and re-enablement, which focuses by necessity on allied health professionals. So despite the focus on that, we've seen a decrease in the average. So what date was that 4.86?
That was the second quarter of the 23-24, so the December quarter of
December 23,
yeah.
23-24. Okay, thanks. Okay, that's fine. We'll keep a look at that as we keep going. I'm just going to ask some questions about the residential ratios that are in the budget. Well, sorry, we're in the budget in 24.
So my colleague Ms Trainer's just joined us, who can provide the relevant detail. I guess I'd just start by, Senator, just by noting that those provision ratios, I think you're referring to, are there for planning purposes, but they don't dictate.
No, well, I was going to ask you.
That. And the changes in the ratios reflect a few different things. One is the increased support that people are accessing in their homes. And the other is some changes in the demographics of the cohort that are over 65 or over 70. So I'll just ask Ms Traynor to take you through that.
Yeah, so my question really goes to the point of in 2024, I think it was my for 24, there was a decision taken that banked $2 billion that's reduced the ratio from 78 per thousand to 60 per thousand, and that popped $2 billion on the bottom line. It was it was a little vague, but it appeared as if it was a temporary measure. So I'm just interested to understand, since you've reduced the ratio, what has been the real evidence in terms of what the ratio in terms of the population? Is it sitting more closely to the 60 per thousand?
Senator, I don't have numbers in front of me that compare the actual experience of residential aged care to those planning ratios. I would note they are not a cap on the system. They are projections of utilisation of residential aged care. Yeah,
I get that, but you've had utilisation of aged care since you made those predictions. Have they come true?
We'd have to take that on notice.
Okay, so is anywhere in your budget savings relate to any of this?
in the current budget, Senator.
So what's your current budget planning ratio?
The budget planning ratios have not changed since that.
So it's still 60 to 1,000?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, it's 60 to 1,000. This has been in place for 2 years and you don't know whether it's correct or not.
We do. I mean, we do it at a budget or a MAFO. We would put through estimates variations if there was a significant differential between the projected planning ratio and what the actual outcomes are in residential aged care.
And can you give me that information?
We haven't.
There hasn't been a variation since then. So that's not to say there's not minor variations, but there hasn't been any that's been material enough to warrant us changing our estimates since since the changes to the revision ratio.
So when you made the change to the revision ratio in 2024, that was on the basis of real-time data that suggested 60 to 1,000 was correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And it was a drop from 78 to 60, so it was a pretty big drop. We've got an ageing population. We've heard today of incredible demand, although we didn't really get enough data to actually quantify that demand. And you're saying there has been no change in terms of the demand ratio for residential aged care. Is that what you're telling me?
That's correct. And it's important to know, as you've mentioned, the ageing population, that is actually one of the factors as to why the planning ratio dropped. The planning ratio is based on the population aged 70 and over, but the reality is that people overwhelmingly, the average age of entry to residential aged care is above 80, and so what we've actually had is a strange demographic shift where a larger than average share of the population 70 and over is at the younger end of that cohort, which is why the planning ratio begins to increase again from 24-25.
But your planning suggested that you needed 10,600 new beds every year for 10 years. We heard that evidence earlier. So is that a suggestion that we've got a massively increased population, and so therefore the ratio, which is a bigger population but the ratio is smaller?
That's correct.
That's absolutely correct. So the proportion of people aged 70 and over has grown. That's growing slightly faster. So that adds to demand. The shift in the provision ratio
Slightly faster?
Sorry?
Only slightly faster?
Considerably faster. We've got a real wave of the baby boomers at the moment because we're exactly 80 years after 1946. So we can all sort of do the math and work out why there's so many people turning 80 right now. So the proportion of the population that is older is absolutely growing. That means that demand is growing. The provision ratio reflects the usage of residential care by that group of people, which is gradually trending down, just not quite fast enough to take the edge off overall demand.
Yeah. So it's a 1.8% decrease on a per capita ratio basis from 78 to 60. Because, I mean, part of the reason that... So do you measure that demand on the basis of... How do you measure that?
So those planning ratios do, as I mentioned, they talk about the demographics of that population to develop a projection. There is also an element in that 24-25 MAIFO measure of projections about the changed utilisation of in-home aged care.
Yep. Okay. No, sorry. Yep. Step back.
Sure.
When you made you made the decision in 24-25 that you want to drop it from 78 to 60 on the basis of what was your the basis of your how did you calculate that it had dropped from 78 to 60?
I mean, these are ratios that are developed and reconsidered each budget and each MAIFO using forward estimates models and the population models.
No. The forward estimate models are projecting what's going forward. How do you actually determine what is happening now? Like if I said to you right now, in, say, last year, so for 24-25, what was the ratio of older Australians' demand for aged care and as a proportion of older Australians, what would have been the measures that you, or the elements that you used to measure that?
To derive that ratio?
Yeah.
It would be, we would need the number of people in permanent residential aged care and then the number of people aged 70 and over in Australia.
No, you're saying the number of people that are in permanent aged care, that is not the demand for permanent residential aged care. That's the number of people in residential aged care. Just want to understand what goes into demand for it, because demand isn't actually who's in there. Demand is how many people who want it or need it.
So the planning ratios are for budget purposes, and so they are based on the number of people receiving residential aged care services. Because the cost to government of residential aged care is based on who's in aged care rather than who may be looking to enter. The other thing that, of course, changed with these 24-25 MyEFO numbers was a move away from the places to people model where we needed to have some, what you might call buffer in the planning ratio to allow for that sort of making sure there were enough bed licences in the system. So with that removed, it really is just about who needs to be in a residential aged care bed or who is in a residential aged care bed.
Awfully like a cost-saving measure if we don't actually have it's because there's simply not enough residential aged care. You admit that yourself. So I'm just trying to understand.
Sorry, with respect, Senator, I don't think we're saying there is not enough. We've certainly acknowledged, as Ms Evans referred to earlier.
Information.
Well,
Do you have that information?
As Ms Evans referred to earlier, there's approximately 206,000 people in residential care with an occupancy rate just under 90%. So that gives, that 10% difference between 100% and the occupancy rate tells you that not every bed is full. Now, we do know that every bed will be full in the coming years if there's not new supply coming online. So I'm certainly not implying that there's no issues, and there may very well be localised issues, but we don't see a big difference, if any, between, as you've just pointed to, the demand for residential care and the number of people who are in residential care.
How do you measure occupancy rate?
I might ask Ms Evans, who's already on her way to the table, just to take us through that methodology.
No, I don't want the methodology. I want to know how you collect the information.
Oh.
Okay, hi Senator. So in terms of measuring occupancy, as I said, we collect claim days. So the number of claim days that a residential aged care provider has claimed funding for via through Services Australia, divided by the number of available place days. And that is the places that aged care providers report to us in their services that are available for use over a particular period.
Okay, because it's really interesting that I think you quoted 90.9%, or 90.9%. Like aged care providers are telling us they are at capacity now. So how much, I'm not sure what the word is, what percentage of beds and for what period of time is allowed for, because we know that the turnover in aged care homes is becoming much shorter because of the level of acuity of people when they go in. What is the time frame after somebody no longer needs the bed and the bed being able to, or the room being able to be allocated to somebody else in terms, because I mean your measure wouldn't take into account the 33% turnover every year of beds that there is obviously a period of time when they won't have anybody in those rooms. So what is the percentage of downtime when you change over a resident?
Some information I do have, and I'll just test whether it answers the question that you're getting to, Senator, is under the new Aged Care Act, providers are required to tell us if a bed is offline. And I'm just looking for this, Susan might have this up off the top of her head, that if it's offline for a period of 3 months, I believe. Okay, yeah, under the new Aged Care Act, all registered aged care providers are required to tell the Commission within 14 days if the bed will be offline for at least 3 months. So it goes to the question that you're asking. If a bed's offline for 3 months or longer, it will be included. Well, it will be excluded for the number of operational beds that are used in that occupancy calculation.
I mean, I'm not imagining that a bed will be offline for 3 months, but it's not unreasonable that a bed could be offline for a month. And if you've got a 30% turnover, that's an awful lot of bed nights. So if you're talking, I mean, what I'm trying to understand is what is reasonable full occupancy under your measure? Because there's no way in the world 100%, if you've got 30% turnover every year, there is no way that 100% is even remotely realistic. What is a reasonable measure on the basis of that calculation of full occupancy, which will then sort of go to the argument that Mr. Is it Gerazio put forward that we aren't at capacity at the moment. I would contest that, given your geographical adjustments that occur, that a 90.9% occupancy under your definition of an occupancy would be getting very close to capacity. And if you take out those days, then you're probably looking at sort of 96% or whatever is probably full occupancy. So just keen to understand how we are booking savings, which have been booked from 24-25 MAEFO, on the ratio reductions, when we really don't have a true measure of what demand really is. Because having somebody in a home is not necessarily the same as somebody needing to be on that home.
It is certainly the case that residential aged care operates differently to a hotel room, in that you don't have one person leave at 10 in the morning and another person move in the next afternoon.
Well, of course.
So that sort of about a month is generally the sort of thing we hear from the sector. So that 95, 96% occupancy rate is what the sector will describe to us as functionally full, yes.
Yeah, so they are in effect functionally full under your definition.
Oh, Senator, I was just going to say, I think we could also take offline. I was just looking to see if either of us had the numbers now, what the ratio of people currently using aged care, residential aged care is as a proportion of the population. So per 1,000. So that would give that data would all be publicly available, but that would show how the planning ratio compares to actual usage, but I just don't have that in front of me and would need to take that on notice.
We do have, I've gotten some numbers on this which suggest that at the moment 206,000 residents is very slightly below what the actual projected planning ratio was for 2025-26.
But that could well be just because the beds aren't available where they're needed. So to be clear, you aren't accounting for the time that a bed is offline after somebody passes away. That's not accounted in your measure.
Unless the provider is taking that bed offline for a longer period of time to do something like substantial renovations, they would not report that to us and it would not be captured in that occupancy rate. Okay, so basically your occupancy rate is a false figure.
The other thing I would say, and we'll start to collect some more data on it now that the new Aged Care Act has come into place. That is the legislative requirement. The other thing that we are doing is it's just a very simple system change where providers can go in and enter on the system if a bed is offline. So while the legislative requirement might be 3 months, there will be a lot of communications with providers encouraging them to update easily when a bed is offline, even if it's offline for a month or so, so that we can get a better understanding of occupancy closer to.
But my point is that your occupancy figure is actually not taking into account the period of time that a bed is offline following a resident passing away. So therefore, your occupancy rate is a figure that is misleading in the sense of occupancy rates. You really need to actually build in to your occupancy rates an amount of time that is realistic for family to come and, you know, deal with the estate or the possessions of the person, fix up all the financial arrangements, whatever it happens to be that month. If you're not accounting for that month, you don't have a true reflection of occupancy. So 90.9% occupancy is not a true reflection because it doesn't take that into account. That's all I'm arguing. I'm not suggesting that you're not doing other things, but that's my point. And so therefore it goes to, I just don't understand how we don't have a measure of what the demand is. Quite clearly we're at capacity despite the fact that you're saying you're not at capacity. The fact that you don't even think you're at capacity when you haven't taken into account all of these extra things that play into the numbers worries me. That the drop from 78 to 60, which was done 2 years ago, you've done no further, 18 months ago, you've done no further analysis around that. We know we've got this massive demand coming to us. It just looks like a save to the bottom line, to be frank. But if you've got more information you're able to provide to be able to give me an understanding of what that demand really is. And it's not how many people are in aged care, it's how many people have been assessed as needing or eligible for residential care that are not in that aren't in aged care should be added to that demand target. It's not just the people that are in there, because the number of people in aged care could just be a reflection of how many aged care beds are available.
Did you give us some evidence, though, before about people being assessed for residential aged care who might not actually take that up? So that would very much overinflate that number.
Well, there is a number, though, isn't there? I mean, some of them may not want to take it up, but some of them might. How many people who would like to take it up, in a position to need to take it up, are unable to take it up, needs to be added to the number. It's not just the number of people who are actually in residential aged care as we sit here today. Correct or not?
I think some of what you're referring to, Senator, goes to Ms Traynor had referred to earlier, that there are a lot of people who have an assessment for residential care that they've got alongside their support at home assessment, and at some point may or may not take up a residential place.
No, we accept that. We accept that, I'm saying, but they're not all of them, are they?
Not
every
all.
Single person that gets assessed for a residential and is assessed as being eligible or needing a residential aged care place, not every single one of them doesn't take it up.
No, that's... You're
I'd just
correct.
like to know how many haven't taken it up that have been assessed, because at this stage the figure of demand appears to be how many people are in residential aged care, but you can't give me the number of people who have been assessed as being eligible for residential aged care who might like to take up or may need to take that up. Except there's some that are choosing not to, but there obviously are some that choose to. They need to be added to it to find out what that real ratio figure should be.
And just perhaps to elaborate on my earlier comments, the occupancy rates are a national or statewide number. None of that is to suggest that there can't be local constraints, that people may not be able to find a bed in the place that they want it at the time that they need it. To the extent that we've got information on that, we're happy to provide it. But, you know, once someone has an assessment, it's hard for us to know what's in their mind in terms of at what point do they become ready to seek a place. We get some of that information from providers and anecdotally, and we'll look at what we hold that's able to answer that question for you.
In a sense, in terms of budgeting, if you're going to put these numbers in your budget, you need to have a found basis in fact for why you're doing it. It seems to me that you're putting numbers into budgets without actually really thinking through or having a sound basis on why you're doing it. Because if you really wanted to know, the easiest thing for you to do would be to ask your residential aged care providers what their waiting list is. That'll give you a pretty good idea about how many people aren't in there that want to go in there. and I haven't spoken to an aged care provider in a very long time that doesn't say they've got a waiting list.
The challenge with using waiting lists is because it's very different to the support at home process. Individuals will be registered on multiple waiting lists at the same time. So it is, whilst that is something we will absolutely look at what data we do hold, but we don't have something that is X many people are waiting for a residential aged care place, because they will appear on multiple waiting lists for multiple homes at the same time.
I'm sure you could work out a way of coming up with a better sort of metric in terms of understanding what demand for residential aged care is, to see whether your ratios are actually accurately reflecting demand in the system, just as I think you could do a whole heap better job of actually getting the information and providing that in relation to occupancy rates, because there seems to be pieces of information that are completely and utterly being ignored that actually would tell the true story. That's all I've gleaned from my discussions today. Can I just ask about means testing and in relation to DAP and RAD payments? And it's not in relation to the $33 million new measure changes, it's about existing. Is that you guys? Yep, okay. So I spoke to Services Australia about this the other night and got some reasonably random answers. Is the department aware of cases where new residents who are entering residential aged care are being required to pay a DAP while they're waiting for Services Australia to complete their means testing assessment, despite the person intending and being financially capable of paying a RAD? They're waiting for the assessment to take place to formalise the arrangements. Sometimes they're waiting anywhere up to 2 months, 3 months for this, but they're being required to pay a DAP payment while they're waiting for the assessment, even though they know they're going to pay a RAD, they know that they're financially capable of paying a RAD, but they have to wait for an assessment before they're able to do it.
Yes, Senator, we are aware of those cases.
Yeah. Services Australia said that the average time it takes to complete a means test is 45 days, but they couldn't tell me what the longest period of time. Are you aware what the longest period of time is?
Senator, we're not aware of anything. Services Australia don't hold in respect to that, noting that they administer that means assessment process on behalf of the department.
These people are being assessed by Services Australia by virtue of policies of your department.
Well, the procedure is that the department looks after the means testing policy, and then Services Australia administers that. A person's means test is completed by them completing the calculation of the cost of your aged care form and submitting that and the necessary evidence requirements to Services Australia.
You don't bother to find out how long it's taking for the people that your policy is impacting, how long it's taking them to get access to the information they need?
I think what I'm saying here, Senator, is that we rely on the information Services Australia provides us to know how long that takes.
And what information is that?
I think the same observation that they have given to you about the 45-day period.
No, how the longest time? They wouldn't give me that.
I don't have that information. I understand Services Australia would have taken that on notice last week.
And how many people is currently being affected by this delay?
We don't have an exact number. We would note that around 40% of non-supported residents, it is based on our recent data, is their preference that they pay by RAD. We do know that a large share of those RAD payers, however, are not what you may say ready to pay a RAD on the day that they enter care. So it's quite common that they need to do something like sell their former principal place of residence before they can pay a RAD. So it is a much smaller subset of that percentage of RAD payers.
But nonetheless,
it is a number of a significant number of potential RAD payers, and we've certainly been working with the sector on resolution here.
So when I asked Services Australia about how many, whether providers are required to return the DAP payments to the individual once the means test has been completed and the RAD's been paid, can you do you agree with Services Australia that the provider is required to return the DAP payments to the individual once they pay the RAD?
So, Senator, my understanding is that Services Australia has advised the committee that the evidence given in regard to that was incorrect. The DAP is not refundable, and I understand that has been corrected.
So if you elect to pay a RAD, you're happy to pay a RAD, you're at the mercy of the timeframes of Services Australia at whatever the DAP payment is that equates to the RAD that you're going to pay, despite the fact that you've elected to pay a RAD.
That's correct.
But of course, Senator, it's not just in the period you're paying the DAP before the RAD starts. The calculation of the retention payments on the RAD and the tying up of that capital only happens from the time you're paying the RAD. So as there is a, not for everyone, a broad equivalence, depends on a whole range of circumstances, but it's not like a double payment. It's a DAP period then a RAD period.
Yeah, but you don't get a choice not to have a DAP period.
You need to be processed by Services Australia to start the RAD period, that's correct.
Yeah, so whether you like it or not, you're getting whacked with a DAP for the period of time it takes Services Australia to process. They can't tell me how many people are stuck in this pile, and they can't tell me what the longest period of time they're stuck in this pile for.
All I'm saying, Senator, is I wouldn't characterise that as, for example, a double payment, that you're paying DAPs and RADs. I acknowledge you want to as fast as possible, and we can take on notice the sort of metrics that Services Australia report to us, because we do get metrics from Services Australia on all the things that we actually engage with them to provide those services.
And we do, just further to that, just wanted to clarify a comment that Ms Traynor said. We are in regular discussions with Services Australia. They're a key partner delivery agency around matters that get raised with us and be brought to our attention, and work through those with them. So we do very much work with them collaboratively to get the system operating well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it seems like the individual is denied the choice of how they wish to pay, because surely Services Australia could either do it a little more quickly, or there could be a... Has anybody spoken to older Australians about how they would like this issue to be rectified? Because it has been raised on several occasions. If there is an alternative means where they don't have to pay the DAP, maybe there's a back payment on the RAD, because the MPIR is a hell of a lot higher than the value of the financial or the capital that's invested in the RAD would earn on the market.
Senator, what I would say is we do understand that this is causing problems for some people. For those who know that they have high means, that they're likely to need to pay a RAD, and that the means test will not be effective, they have the option of simply indicating that they don't want to disclose their means and move straight to be able to pay that RAD. There are other people for whom it is an issue. That's not lost on us, and we are listening to concerns from the sector and from older Australians. There is some complexity in this that we just want to take the time to work through. One of which is that the decision to pay a RAD is quite a significant one, in the sense that people may often have to liquidate another asset in order to make the payment, or the family may be providing it. There were concerns from older advocates for older people that until that means test clarified someone's situation, that people may have felt pressured to pay a RAD that ultimately would have had to be refunded or wound back. That's quite problematic to do so. So whilst I understand the problem that's being raised, we are kind of looking at it as an issue at the moment, and whether there are some changes that we're able to put forward.
So when did this first become an issue? How long has this situation been in place?
This was a change that came as a result of the commencement of the new Act. So I have a timeline in front of me which notes that...
So what happened before that?
Before that, before 1 November, it was possible for a person to pay a RAD before their means assessment had been completed if they and the provider were comfortable.
So why did you change it?
So the timeline I have here notes that as part that in May 2025, after the Act passed the Parliament, Ageing Australia noted its submission that there was a gap in the legislation which did not allow providers to charge for accommodation at all between when a person entered residential care and when they had their means test completed. The Act was amended through the COLA process last year, and the amendment there reinstated the ability for a provider to charge an interim accommodation payment, but only in the form of a DAP. And so there was no sort of discussion or commentary or feedback about this before the commencement of the Act, and it was only once the Act commenced and operationally this sort of a barrier to a person who was willing and able to pay a RAD was identified.
But what I don't understand the rationale about why somebody who was willing and able to pay it wasn't able to just pay it. Why does it have to go through the Services Australia palaver?
It's the Act has specified that the interim payment can only be in the form of a daily payment, so that interim accommodation for a means test.
Why can't they just pay it up front? Are you telling me that it has to be assessed by Services Australia? Can't I just walk in on day one and just pay a cheque and hand it over?
Not under the current provisions of, I think it's section 294 of the Act.
And that changed in November?
That changed in November.
What was the basis for its change?
As I've described, what happened is that when the original Act passed the Parliament in 2024, it had no provision for a person to be charged for their accommodation at all between when they entered care and when they had their means assessment completed.
Sorry. I'm not explaining myself. I don't want to be assessed. I don't want to go anywhere near Services Australia. I just want to go in there and pay my RAD. Why can't I pay my RAD on day one?
And so it is an option for a person to declare that they wish to be means not disclosed. So you can end up, means not disclosed means effectively means I don't want to tell the government about my personal circumstances, and I accept that I will pay the maximum amount of in the means testing for both. I'll pay for my accommodation costs, but for everything. That's correct.
So you're denying somebody the ability to just pay their RAD because they've decided that they want to pay a RAD. They know that their means are going to be, they're not going to be supported. No, their means are beyond that. They just want to pay the RAD, but they may well be eligible for some level of means testing, or maybe that's a question to you. So in order to be means tested such that you are not eligible to be a supported resident, is that same threshold for means testing applied to other means testing for your everyday living, etc.? No. Is it the same ratios or thresholds?
No, it is. So the way the means tested fees stack is that you become liable for the accommodation cost first, and then under the new system, some point later, you become liable for the hotelling supplement and then the non-clinical care contribution. So
you are actually taking away all choice and control of the individual who's made the decision that they've got $250,000 in assets or whatever it is that means that you're not a supported resident, but they may not have much more means, which means that they'd be eligible for the hotelling supplement and the everyday living fee supplements. So you're either denying them the ability to be able to get access to that means testing, or you're forcing them to pay a DAP for the period of time that it takes Services Australia to means test them. Why do the two have to be linked? Why can't the person have the choice and control over their life to say, I'm going to accept I just want to pay a RAD and I'm going to pay it on day one, but I'm still going to send myself off to Services Australia for a means testing assessment because I may well be eligible for means testing for other measures?
And look, Senator, this is certainly the crux of the issue that providers and Council on the Ageing have raised with us in terms of we have a resident willing and able and provider willing to accept, and we're working through with them in terms of trying to identify a solution to this particular barrier.
I suppose I still don't actually understand what the rationale was in the first place to decide that you had to send off your details for means testing as it applied to your accommodation component of your residential aged care, why that ever happened?
There was certainly concerns about what happens to a person who is ultimately found to be low means in the interim period between when they enter residential care and when their means test is concluded. If they have paid a RAD, potentially done something like sell a home when they did not need to sell that home because they were ultimately going to be found to be partially supported. So those were the sorts of the reasons behind the decision. Obviously, there are other factors here that were not fully understood when those decisions were made.
I have to say, you know, in discussions over the last however many years on this, the idea that the new Aged Care Act puts the rights of older Australians at the centre of the framework of that Act has got to be the furthest thing from reality that I have ever seen. I have never seen anything that has taken rights away from older Australians like this Act has. It's just been regulation and burden and compliance and requirement and restriction just piled on top of each other. And this is just another classic example of older Australians having their choice and control taken away from them because of another heavy-handed regulatory burden that's been enacted by the government. I just find it incredible that we did this all to give older Australians greater control of their rights. But anyway, thank you. Can I just ask a few questions about the ANAO's report or review into CHISP? Hi there. I think last few times we've been at estimates, we've asked a number of questions around information around CHISP, and there was a lack of ability of the department to actually have much understanding. Like you've got in your budget papers that says 860,000 people. Could you explain to me what that 860,000 actually is? Because it says older people receive home care services that support them, number of clients that access Commonwealth home support services, and you've got 860,000. Do you know who those 860,000 people are, and what do you mean by the metric access Commonwealth home support services?
Precisely what you've just explained, Senator. So 860,000 people accessing services through the CHSP.
Do you know who they are?
Not yet.
So how do you know there's 860,000 if you don't know who they are?
We know that we fund 860,000.
860,000 episodes of care, or 860,000 people who have been assessed as eligible? So you say you've got 860,000 what?
860,000 people accessing care through the program. We know that providers tell us how many people, or that they're required to tell us how many people they deliver services to in their reporting to the Department of Social Services.
But they don't tell you who they are. They just say Meals on Wheels, or say I delivered 100,000 meals this year. Is that what you mean?
That used to be what they did. From January this year, the expectation is that they also provide an aged care ID for each and every client.
So you've got 860,000 individual aged care IDs that have received services that you fund under the Commonwealth Home Support Program?
Not yet. That is the plan, that we will get to an aged care ID for each and every client accessing the program. As I said earlier, the requirement to provide an aged care ID for each and every client was introduced in January. We've provided a 6-month lead time for providers to get their stock of clients loaded into the system. We are partway there. Our expectation is that clients, that providers are there by the end of the financial year, and we're tracking that with our partners at the Community Grants Hub. But that is where we're up to in that piece of work.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to understand how you know 860,000 people are accessing the services when, I mean, I understand from what you've just said, you're trying to put things in place so that you can identify that. But in the absence of having 860 unique aged care numbers and you knowing that they've accessed services that are being funded through CHSP, I just don't understand how you know that you may have assessed 860,000 people as being eligible to access CHSP, but how many of them actually are accessing CHSP? I mean, I don't understand how you can say that you know that you've got 860,000 when you've just told me you don't actually know who they are.
We're pretty sure, Senator.
How? Could you just tell me how you measure it?
Well, I'm about to, if you'll let me speak. How we've measured it to date is we have up until January required that providers report to us how many outputs they deliver and how many clients they have. We have not until January required that they provide an aged care ID for all of their clients. So in the acquittals process and the performance reports process that providers go through on a regular basis with Services Australia, they provide that data, which is then provided back to the department through the aged care data warehouse, and that data is looked at. We verify whether or not we've met the target and report into the annual report.
Okay, so outputs, so let's go back to Meals on Wheels. So in Meals on Wheels, the outputs would be that you funded them to deliver 100,000 meals, and they come back and say they've delivered 100,000 meals and they've delivered those 100,000 meals to 20,000 clients. That's the kind of data you've been collecting up until your changes.
Correct.
Okay. So that assumption then means that if a client is receiving 10 services within a service area, they could be collected. They could be counted 10 times in that. How do you differentiate between somebody who's receiving one service and somebody who's receiving 10 services if all you're getting is number of clients and number of outputs?
So I'd probably have to take some of the detail to that methodology on notice and make some inquiries with our technical teams.
Senator Ruston, if you want, when you get to the end of this line of questioning, we might rotate the call. Of course. Thank you.
Okay. So do you know how many CHSP clients are currently receiving services without having completed an aged care assessment?
We have estimates, and we're not certain whether those estimates are correct because we have not yet completed this 6-month process of assurance over the collection of aged care IDs. In the lead up to the commencement of the new Act, we did do quite a lot of work with CHSP providers because we were aware that there was a long-running issue in the sector that not all clients had been assessed as eligible, and that providers had an embedded practice where they would provide services to clients without taking them through an assessment process. In the lead up to the commencement of the new Aged Care Act last November, that practice has kind of become illegal. We can't provide funding for clients who aren't assessed, and so there was a job lot of work over several months to work with CHSP providers, a lot of communications and support to help understand how many clients they estimated they were providing services to who hadn't been assessed, to support providers to refer those clients through the assessment system, We implemented some flagging through the assessment system to ensure those clients were assessed in an urgent basis as we got closer to the Act commencing, so that we wouldn't see a continuity of service issue for clients who were already in care but needed to be assessed, were waiting to be assessed and hadn't quite got through that door yet. We did see a good number of clients come through that flagging system. To the best of my memory, it was about 3,000 who'd been flagged through My Aged Care as receiving services needs assessment before Aged Care Act commences. We also implemented an exceptions process whereby for providers who were working with clients that had a specific vulnerable cohort who, for a range of reasons, struggled to engage with the assessment system, and some of those reasons being quite understandable to government, for example, due to previous traumas in interacting with government services. For those providers, we did some intensive work with them, with the department, to support an exception pathway in the lead up to the new Aged Care Act, whereby those clients could be legally assessed through a collection of minimum data and deemed as eligible for care through a departmental delegate. And about 200 clients came through that process. So, yes, it was a long-running issue we're aware of. A range of work was done and is continuing to be done to understand whether the issue remains, and if it does, to what extent it remains, and it's a work in progress.
So is the department confident it'll have fit-for-purpose data systems by the 1st of July 2027 when CHSP is scheduled to transition across into supported home?
It's a very broad question, Senator, and just to go back to some of my previous evidence from today, we don't yet have a decision on what we're transitioning to. So you're asking me to put some confidence behind something of which we're still waiting for a threshold government decision, which I think would probably not be useful at this point in time.
So have you done any modelling regarding any transition activities in relation to CHSP, or are you just sitting there waiting for somebody to give you some direction?
What do you mean by modelling, Senator?
Well, you've got 860,000 people that are currently receiving support for remaining in their homes through the CHSP, the block-funded model. We don't know what that is going to look like and where those 860,000 people are going to be getting that support from into the future. I'm just keen to understand, maybe, Senator or Minister, you might be able to answer us. What is the time frame that the government is intending to let 860,000 older Australians know where their care is going to be coming from in little more than a year's time?
I'd have to take it on notice to provide you with a bit more detail, Senator Ruston.
We're sitting here 13 months from the 1st of July 2027. We heard today that a very narrow change in relation to how showering, incontinence and wound care was going to be moved from one category to another, was going to take, 3 to 6 months and all these technical changes, and, it was going to be a massive, massive undertaking just to change who was making the payment. 13 months out, we've got 860,000 people on a program, and we have no information as to whether the program is going to be extended, the program is going to be terminated, or the program is going to be rolled into supported home. Just keen to understand, have you done any work to ensure your preparedness, and what is the drop-dead date where you could no longer be able to facilitate a transition away from Commonwealth Home Support Program into supported home by the 1st of July 2027?
Senator, I think a number of witnesses have said this a number of times, which is the commitment from government was no earlier than 1 July 2027. There has not been a decision on the transition point. There has not been a decision on the form of that transition. That is still being considered by government. We have provided various advice to them at times on what the transition could be. and we will take into account implementation timeframes, precisely for the reasons you say, that there are 860,000 people affected by this program and around 1,300 current providers. So we're well aware of the issues you've raised, and we're discussing that with government on a continuous basis.
So I suppose the question is, government's got to make a decision. You've then got to do all the things that you have to do to enact and enable that decision. And then the sector has got, subsequent to that, got to become ready in order to implement. Like, how much more uncertainty are you going to put the sector through? When, as you say, 860,000 people, 1,300 providers, and we're sitting here 13 months out, and I'm not blaming you, but we have no information about what's going to happen. They might just kick the can down the road. They may decide they're going to keep the program. They might tell you that you've got to turn around and fix this all in a matter of seconds. I mean, like, what is realistic here? I mean, we don't need another debacle like the rollout of the Aged Care Act because of all the timings and things being forced. I mean, when are you going to provide advice to the government that it's time that you need an answer about the delivery of this program post the 1st of July? I mean, what's your drop-dead date to be able to do anything?
Senator, I just don't think that's particularly helpful. There's no drop-dead date. It depends on the nature of the advice and the nature of the transition, which we've said a number of times.
And so when are you going to tell the sector what's going on? Like, you gave the sector 6 weeks' notice when it came to not introducing caps. You gave the sector 1 month's notice when you decided you weren't going to implement the Aged Care Act on the 1st of July. I mean, like, this is completely unreasonable behaviour by a government to expect a sector to respond in such a short time frame, and you can't even change your government systems to be able to change the payments for incontinence care and bloody showers in less than sort of 3 or 4 months. But you were expecting the sector to make these wide, broad-scale changes in a matter of weeks because the government can't make its mind up in time. I mean, this is just a pattern of behaviour, and I think it's completely unfair on the sector, but it's most unfair on older Australians who have been living with uncertainty, and I think they deserve certainty about what's happening with CHSP going forward. And I think it's incumbent, Minister, that your government makes its decision about what it's doing sooner rather than later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing again. Good to see you, Mr Conley. My questions are for the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. Problems with the aged home care package, please. Late last year in Senate estimates, before this committee, I raised the case of the Smith family. Under their package, they're entitled to some assistance in minor property maintenance, needing some minor trimming of half a tree and a few branches of another on their property. That was not completed, yet they found that $3,000 had been taken out of their package and given to the contractor without discussion between the Smiths and the service administrator of the package. The Aged Care and Quality Commission closed off their complaint and refused to even discuss it with the Smiths, with no explanation given. Isn't this elder abuse by a government agency that is supposed to help older Australians, not abuse them? What's the cover-up, and why was $3,000 paid for next to nothing?
So, Senator Roberts, I'm not sure about the appropriateness of responding to individual complaints or issues. I think characterising them is one thing, but referring to individual cases is
we have permission
quite
from
different.
we have permission from the Smiths.
But we don't have that, and the department don't have that.
How typical is this?
Senator, let me try and respond to you. Sometimes these cases are very complex. There is often miscommunication. There's different versions of events from providers versus older people. I appreciate...
I'm sure you're right.
Sorry?
Roberts,
What did you say?
I'm just backing her up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're right. It would be complex.
And so we do our best to understand the circumstances, what's happened, what's gone wrong, and look at what we can do to restore people to, make up for what's happened to them, find an equitable solution. So we do our best efforts. Obviously, I won't speak about the individual case because I don't have permission to speak from those people. But cases like this where people quoted different amounts for different pieces of work and then they may misapprehend what was going to be done, what's happened with their package, etc. It's not an unusual case, and we do try and reach a sensible resolution. All our complaints are subject to review and appeal, so if people aren't happy with where we've resolved a matter, they do have opportunity to ask first for an internal review and then seek external review if they're still not comfortable.
Thank you, and I'm not pretending it's simple. Some of these cases are simple, but it's badly affected the health of the two innocent senior citizens who deserve an answer and money put back into their package. A staff member of the Minister contacted my office and assured us that the issue would be resolved and money would be reimbursed quickly. The result, though, was nothing happened, not even contact with the family. 5 months have passed since the promise was made. Because of the depleted funds, the Smiths had to cancel some medical appointments that they could no longer afford.
Again, Senator Roberts, the department is not going to be able to respond to this individual case in this setting.
Well, if I'm told by the Minister's staff that they've contacted the Smiths and they haven't.
I'm not aware of what the Minister's staff may have said, but I'm happy, Senator, to go away and provide you with what advice I can about what engagement there has been in this particular case.
Okay, could you...
Just to add to that, Senator Roberts, we don't want to be dismissive of the issue, and I'm happy to follow up with the Minister's office to see what's on there. But I think we're just uncomfortable responding to a couple circumstance in this forum. But I assure you that we'll do what we can to follow up appropriately and ensure that we can do what we can, where possible, to resolve it, but knowing that some of these cases can be difficult.
That'd be great, Minister. Thank you. Could you contact my office?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just see. And now the concept of co-payments. The concept of co-payments is to be instituted into the aged care packages. That will mean the cancellation of many services needed by package holders because they'll become unaffordable. The proposal is that many services will need to be paid for at more than $100 an hour, often more than twice the market labour rate. An aged pensioner cannot afford that. What are you doing about this situation?
So, Senator, the department might wish to speak about the policy on contributions, but we have are undertaking extensive work around unreasonable pricing. We've been in contact with a number of providers where we have concerns that their pricing is unreasonable, and I've asked them to provide us with an explanation of how they've reached their prices. In some cases, they've agreed to actually adjust their price and have even provided refunds. So certainly we're dealing with those cases on an individual basis, but the question of co-contributions is a policy question, so I don't know.
I'm happy to start. Thank you, Ms Heffernan-Webb. Thank you. In terms of the policy on co-contribution, that was a recommendation that was made by a task force to set co-contribution rates at a level where people who could afford to contribute would contribute to their aged care. We work very closely with Ms Heffernan-Webb, and under the new legislation, our providers are required to be transparent in their prices as well as reasonable, and older people can go and compare prices, and when they feel that it is not reasonable, they can come to us. The last thing I'll say before handing out to my other colleagues is that the government has recently made an announcement around $1 billion of funding to enable a change in the policy setting so that government will now pay for a category of service which includes showering and assistance with dressing and continence. So that's been a significant announcement, but I'll hand over to Ms Traynor to talk more detail.
Thank you.
The other observation there, Senator, is that there is a difference between the service price, so that's when you've talked about the $100 per hour, and then the co-contribution, which is the proportion of that service price that the participant rather than the government pays. So when you talk about a pensioner, for a full rate pensioner, those rates are 5% of services that are in the independence service list category, and then 17.5% of everyday living, which is our cleaning and gardening type of services. So whilst you may have a service price of $100 an hour, what a person pays out of pocket is a very small share of that actual amount.
I get that. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. I look forward to you calling our office. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. We'll go back to Senator Ruston.
Thank you very, 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 very much. Right. Can I have Professor Purvin?
Patience is paid off.
Professor Purvin, I have to ask you, have they given you any staff yet?
No, IHACPA still has one staff member, Senator. Thank you very much for your care and interest. But
All
the
I can say
Secretary
is
is very generous with lending me quite a few people to help me.
All I hope is that he doesn't expect you to provide to his efficiency dividend. So I'm just interested in what advice has been provided by you on whether the current ANAC prices are sufficient to meet the efficient cost of the delivery of mandated care minutes.
The care minutes are actually determined by the department, and we then feed that into our pricing advice. We don't assess the adequacy or any other part of it because they're calculated by the aged care division.
I'm sort of more interested in whether, you know, how do you... So do you factor... You've got a mandated set of care minutes or a time for care minutes. Obviously, you are then required... Do you factor those in at full cost into your ANAC funding?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So have you provided any advice to government to suggest that that they would have inefficient... that providers would have insufficient funding if they were required to exceed their care minutes?
No, Senator, we haven't provided that advice.
Okay, so you factor in the pricing into ANAC as it relates to care minutes at the mandated rate?
At the mandated rate.
Okay, so the mandated rate would probably say that the provider would hit somewhere between 3 and 4 stars on that. So you do not factor the cost for a provider to actually reach 5 stars in your costings. That will be something that they would have to achieve by other means.
Yes.
Okay. Provider feedback has suggested that they feel that they don't even have the funding to cover the mandated care minutes, let alone exceed them. Have you had any feedback to that effect?
No, I haven't had any feedback from providers or other stakeholders about the adequacy of care minutes. In fact, I think the only feedback we've had on care minutes has come from allied health stakeholders who've been seeking more funding for allied health, but they haven't actually targeted the adequacy of care minute funding at all.
Have you provided any advice to government regarding the classification or refinement in relation to funding for people with more complex conditions?
We haven't provided any advice yet, but it is an active discussion that's going on between ourselves and the department around particularly ANAC classes 7, 8 and 9 and the more complex people that are coming through.
So with the algorithm back at the department, when the algorithm is that also used to provide advice in relation to residential care and the ANAC level that the person's on? Or is it only for home care packages?
So if you're referring to the independent assessment tool for supported home,
IAT,
no,
yeah.
it's a separate process to have ANAC assessment.
Okay, so is there any sort of what sort of assessment tool is used for assessing residential aged care?
Once again, it's a departmental issue, but yeah, there is a full ANAC assessment undertaken before someone's taken into residential care that determines at what ANAC level and other adjustments they require. But I'm stealing the department's role
we
here.
have officers at the table who can expand on how that assessment is done.
Mark Chen, Assistant Secretary, Diversity, Dementia and Residential Care Division. Senator, so I think we should start with how the assessment process works for residential care. So in the case of residential care, and sorry if I'm telling you how the things that you're already aware of, the initial step, the IAT step, is essentially an assessment of whether somebody is eligible for residential care, i.e. whether the older Australian needs residential care. Once they are in care for permanent residents, they then get an ANAC classification. And to be clear, they're already in the residential aged care facility at that point. And then they go through the branching structure for the ANAC assessment process, which, once again, there's a very detailed manual. That was the same process that was implemented for the last couple of years, for which they're given the classification, and that is then the funding that is attributed to the variable funding that is attributed to them, noting that ANAC is comprised of two parts, the BCT amount and the ANAC classification amount.
Yeah. Okay, so in relation to that, Professor Purven, have you provided any advice in relation to ANAC and the increased level of compliance and regulatory burden that is acknowledged has occurred since the introduction of the new Act? How have you taken that into account in your assessments?
Not in terms of an increased burden of regulation and reporting or administration, but we do, basically the costing studies are observational studies. So they would capture the amount of time that is taken by providers in undertaking all of that work. And that feeds, once again, into the way that we provide pricing advice. Okay. So it is captured, but not as an increase or in respect to it being a burden. It's just an amount of time that's been spent on admin.
Have you seen an increase in the compliance and regulatory requirements of providers?
Not across the last 3 years, no, we haven't.
In terms of that categorisation of increased regulatory burden, I just wanted to put on the record that the new Act does seek to streamline regulation of the system, in particular the way that all providers get regulated. And so I think that that's important in terms of regulatory burden and compliance, and all of that is driven around improved quality and safety.
Yeah, well, and that may well be the case, Ms Stewart, but that is certainly not the evidence we're receiving. In fact, if there was one thing that the sector is most distressed about, is the amount of time that they have to take out of caring for older Australians to meet the often repetitive reports that are required from so many different departments of this department and other departments of governments, if they're providers for, you are NDIS, you are aged care. And so if there was one thing they complained about, was the amount of duplicative, unnecessary, overly burdensome compliance and reporting and regulation that they have on them. So I'm sure they're all looking forward to the new Act providing them with a streamlined response to that, because I don't think they've seen it as yet. Professor Purven, what cost collection data are you currently receiving from providers to inform your supported home price analysis?
As I mentioned earlier, the study is an observational one, and there is. I actually have just double-checked this with my team in that, as well as gathering data from the providers directly, we are still undertaking residential costing studies using beacons. So there was a comment made recently by an Australian academic that it was common for there to be underreporting of costs in these sorts of studies by 10 to 25%. Now, the origin of that number goes to self-reported costing studies, and it's referred to in the business as administrative leakage. Clinical staff often don't record the time they've spent doing paperwork, compliance requirements and so on, which is why we use the beacons and we track their movements around the facility. We work with the facility to understand what they're doing. Obviously, when they're with a resident, then that's quite easily diagnosed or analysed. When they're in other parts of the facility, we get from the facility what are the tasks they're doing there. At the nursing station, obviously that's going to be administration and care coordination and so on. So we don't miss that 10 to 25%. We actually capture it really well. What we've got from feedback from the sector is that we actually were needing to adjust the way we apportion those administrative costs because of the impact of night shift, where the staff are on standby largely and aren't actually attending in the rooms of the patients and are attending to admin. So it's an interactive observational study that's done using technology to capture everyone's time and what they're doing in the facility with the residents. It's quite laborious, which is why it costs a bit, and it's why we're actually working with the department about alternatives that we can automate those sorts of processes.
How many providers have participated in your cost collection process today?
In the most recent one, just under 200.
And how many are there in the sector? How many providers? What percentage of the sector does that represent?
It's a very good question. I might have to ask one of my departmental colleagues to help me out with that.
I prefer her. She always answers me truthfully.
I can give you the exact number. The number of providers is about 700.
Home care providers?
Providers, not homes, but providers.
Supported home providers?
Oh, sorry.
We're on resi, sorry.
Then my last question was collection of data it's currently receiving from providers to inform supported home price analysis.
I misheard you.
I wonder why you were at the front desk, I might say. Thought maybe you were answering the phone.
I was on a different program too.
Yep, we've currently got around 100 providers participating from supported home.
Okay, and what is that in terms of the percentage of the sector does that represent?
At the moment, it's around 15% of all. It covers 15% of the sector, so that's.
So you've got some really big guys.
Yep. So in order to make sure that we're getting a proper picture of what the true costs of supported home are at the moment, or at the time of the study, we developed a very detailed sampling framework to make sure that the sample was diverse enough, it covered the country, all Triple M regions, specialist providers and so on.
Okay, yep, okay. Does IHACPA consider the current level of provider participation sufficient to produce a comprehensive and nationally representative view of care costs across the sector?
Yes.
I suppose I could have predicted you would have answered that.
But it can be improved, and in fact we are working on recruitment all the time.
So you've made sure that the smaller providers, regional providers, shallow market providers and all of that are representative in your sample?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Have you advised the government on gaps in cost data that are affecting the timing and implementation of pricing reforms, and did you provide advice in relation to price caps?
We provided some general advice on price caps, I think about a year and a half ago, or the Pricing Authority did. And in relation to gaps in the data, the last pricing report, which we released last week, actually indicated that we didn't capture particular things that were implemented after we did the costing study. So we acknowledged some changes in care minutes and some new services which weren't there when we did the costing study, so they're not included in the pricing advice that's just been released.
So you didn't provide any advice to the government in relation to its recent decision not to pursue price caps at this time?
No, not.
Okay. Do you directly engage with older Australians or care recipients to understand their lived experience of pricing and billing, service bundles and out-of-pocket costs and the like, particularly as they relate to the recent changes?
We do, as well as engaging with peak bodies and professional groups and anyone who approaches us. And of course, when we do put documents out, and I realise for older Australians that's not something that they would generally participate in, but we are very keen to get feedback on everything we do. It's a very transparent process. One of the issues that can be challenging for us is that when we do engage, trying to make sure that the people we're engaging with understand our role, that we're just a pricing authority, that our role is very much limited by statute to the consideration of costs of service and giving price and cost information to government. They will frequently want to raise with us issues of quality and safety and things, and so we have to direct them to the appropriate agency, which always comes across as us just trying to shift them around, when in fact, that's the nature of our job, is the focus on cost.
Yeah. And so when you do your pricing, have you got the capacity to be able to reflect the nuances of, metropolitan versus regional versus more remote settings outside of the legislated MMM?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So in terms of, current market limitations, and obviously early stages of developing pricing settings, have you got any concerns that you don't have the capacity to actually provide pricing that's fully reflective of the market conditions, or are you pretty confident that you are absolutely accurately reflecting the market conditions? I mean, it's pretty much saying mark your own homework.
We actually bring other people in to mark our homework. We're pretty strict with ourselves about that, but notwithstanding the quality assurance processes that we go through with our pricing advice, from time to time something will crop up in the costing studies which appears anomalous, or it just surprises us. One straightforward example was health-related transport, which appeared in the costing study to be much cheaper in rural and remote areas than it does in metropolitan areas, which is counterintuitive. And we investigated that, and it turned out that most of the drivers in rural and remote Australia are volunteers. Most of the drivers in metro are paid, so that one was easily solved. But similarly, we have run into issues that we've worked with the department on, where we've got some costs from remote areas in particular which just didn't seem quite right. So we followed it up with additional studies, very much focused on Indigenous specialist services, or those very small resi care facilities that some local governments still own and operate. We know what the costs should look like approximately, so when we get results back that are different to that, we'll investigate that. And we've got some pretty good people for doing that kind of analysis.
So who determines the weightings, the NWALs?
The NWALs?
Yeah.
Are we hopping into hospital funding?
No,
the
aged care, residential aged care, the weighting that you
the weighting,
that's...
Well, we provide advice to government, and the government will then discuss that with the department.
So who determined the change in the weighting?
More than likely based on our advice.
But the decision rests with you, does it?
Yeah, so sorry, you just said NWAL, which is the hospital term, which is confusing. So Yes, their advice is ultimately...
The aged care sector uses that term as well, by the way.
Right. But IHACPA provides advice, but in the case of aged care, the Minister is the ultimate decision maker.
So when you made the changes to the weightings, we won't call them NWALs so we don't confuse anybody, when you make the changes to the weightings in relation to the ANAC funding levels, who made the decision last year in October to change the weightings?
That's ultimately the Minister.
The Minister made those decisions on the basis...
On the advice of IHACPA.
Of IHACPA that went via you, I assume.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. Could I just, nearly getting to the end here, just be interested to have a chat about the number of older Australians that are in hospital. Thank you, Professor Pervin. Pleasure as always.
Thank you, Senator.
Hi, Ms Garrett. At the last estimates hearing, the department advised it was developing a definition of bed blocked or stranded patients to improve data collection across jurisdictions. Just wondering whether that process has been finalised around how to define somebody who is stranded in a hospital.
Trish Garrett, First Assistant Secretary, Service Delivery Division. The process to develop that definition or the data definition hasn't been finalised. It's still underway. So the project's led by Queensland, but of course the Commonwealth is working very closely with Queensland and other jurisdictions. The time frame for it to be finalised is the end of this calendar year. We have settled on a definition which is currently going to be working its way through the governance arrangements up to health ministers by the end of the year.
Okay. So do you know how many people have applied for aged care services while they are in hospital?
No, we don't. I don't have that number.
Does anybody have that number?
No. I'm seeing nods from our assessment colleagues.
So you don't know. So we hear figures that if you are assessed in hospital, you get assessed immediately, but you don't actually know how many people are being assessed from hospital.
Someone would have to have that.
Just going to wait for Mr. Join me. The expert's here now.
We do have data on hospital assessment volumes, which was published in the reports that were released on...
Under the cloak of darkness.
So I'm just pulling up those figures now. So in terms of hospital assessments conducted in the January to March quarter, there were 13,612 hospital assessments conducted. And I've also got the October to December quarter, which was 13,590. So
it's a fairly stable number by the sounds of it. So if you're talking about people who were assessed while they're in hospital, does that also include people who've been referred by a doctor or nurse or other staff in a hospital? Would that count anybody who was actually physically admitted to a hospital seeking an aged care assessment?
So the process tends to be that hospital discharge planners or social workers in hospitals will refer a client for a hospital assessment. There is a judgment made around the circumstances in which it would be best for the client to be assessed in hospital, because there are some circumstances where it's best for the client to be discharged and then assessed in their home environment. So that is a conversation that happens.
So of that 13,000 per quarter, how many of those are discharged before they have their assessment?
These are all figures of assessments that were conducted in the hospital setting.
So these are in hospital assessments, okay?
Yep.
So how many of those people that were assessed as requiring residential aged care?
I'll have to take that on notice. I don't have that breakdown.
Oh, so you don't know of the people who were assessed how many needed residential aged care and how many were assessed for supported home?
Because they all follow a comprehensive assessment pathway, I don't have a breakdown for the final approvals. I would expect a large majority of them would be approved for residential care in addition to other types of care, but in terms of the specific number in each of the last quarters, I'd need to take that on notice.
Do they advise you if the person is unable to go home unless they actually are able to be in receipt of the package or go to a home?
So the person needs to be medically stable before they are assessed. That's one of the requirements, so that the level of support that they would need in either a residential care home or in their home environment can be accurately assessed by an assessor.
So you've got 13,000 people, so we're talking 50,000 plus people a year are assessed from a hospital on the basis of an extrapolation of the figures you've just given me. They have to be medically stable before the assessment takes place. These assessments take place in hospital. How many of these people remain? Well, do you know how long they remain in hospital after their assessment before they receive access to whatever services they've been deemed?
That's not something we track within my team.
So you would not assess somebody for an aged care package in hospital if they weren't medically stable?
That's correct.
Okay. So at which point in this information that we have here do we derive how many people are currently in hospital awaiting provision of home care services or a place in an aged care home?
So we don't, we in the Commonwealth don't hold that data. The states and territories hold that data. That's part of the hospital data.
I know that, and that's been the biggest problem.
Yep, that's why we're working towards that definition. Once we settle the definition, there will be a process that we'll all work towards together around how that data starts to be collected in a consistent way so that we will actually be able to have some robust data around that. That's not what we have now.
Okay, so if somebody is being assessed in their home for an aged care assessment, are they required to be medically stable under those conditions?
Yes.
So who makes the determination that somebody is medically stable enough to have an aged care assessment in their home?
To clarify, our assessment manual says that when a client is being assessed in hospital, they need to be medically stable. We certainly see examples where assessors in the community environment might refer somebody to hospital, etc., if they're considered. It's considered that they need urgent medical attention in addition
Urgent medical attention and medically stable aren't necessarily the same thing. So if you come across somebody that you don't think is medically stable, you don't assess them, you refer them on to medical services.
I think it's about determining what's the right level of care for that person in that moment. And if somebody is assessing them and they're so unwell that they need medical attention, they should get medical attention.
Okay, just sort of understanding the difference between the processes for when somebody's assessed in a hospital and when somebody's assessed in the home. So back to this perennial problem of the inability for the department to know how many people across Australia are currently in hospital as a result of them waiting for a home care package or waiting for a residential care place. You've given me this data before. Do you have the data now?
Ms. Garrett said that we don't.
We don't hold the data, so we.
I didn't say you held the data, but you've had the data before.
I think, as Ms. Garrett said a few times, we are working to accommodation in states and territories. We're not there yet, and so we're very cautious of providing data that's not on a consistent basis across the country. So we are working very cooperatively with the states now to develop that. We're working on other things on delayed discharge, but we haven't got that agreed definition yet.
Okay, I'll just think about that for a minute. And just finally to run home, could I have the Inspector General? Hi, how are you, Siebel Brown?
Hello.
So can I just quickly wanted to run through just your general views in relation to supported home, common home support and residential aged care program. So I'm just wondering what your views are around the supported home program, if you think it's running as it was intended.
So, Senator, you'll recall that I foreshadowed some serious concerns about the supported home program in my 2025 report on the government's implementation of the Royal Commission recommendations, and that the plumbing didn't potentially match the promise held out by the Act. And I think that that's come to fruition. And I've certainly seen a huge increase in the number of older people contacting me with their stories, but equally that's being reflected in what I'm hearing from the sector and in some of the data that I'm seeing. So there are probably a myriad of issues that I could go into describing around that. And I would say that I'm sad about that, because I think the philosophy behind supported home and the intent to keep people home ageing in place is not only a laudable one that would be held out by most Australians as their wish, but I also think there is a very strong economic basis for ensuring people are as independent and connected to their community as long as possible. The longer we keep people at home supported and their cognitive and physical decline reduced, the less people come into residential aged care, the more they are delayed in coming to residential aged care, and that is the most expensive end of the system. So it's a fiscally strong position as well.
Yeah. So have you examined in any way that, you know, package rationing and partial packages are contributing to the challenges in terms of unmet needs?
We are taking a good look at that economically at the moment. So I think our observations would be in the office across a range of areas that there are a number of disincentives tacitly operating within the system that mean, so to start with, some people are dropping out of the system because it's a maze for them and it's too hard to access care, or even to access an assessment, so they drop out of the system. Certainly we are hearing multiple cases of under-assessment and then people having huge delays in trying to get reassessed. And of course we've heard of instances where people have sought an assessment through the single assessment system, had their assessment halved when they were coming seeking more care, and subsequently when they finally were able to get a reassessment died the day before. We're hearing that, and we are really encouraged to hear that the Ombudsman is conducting a review of the IAT based on 835 odd complaints that he has received. So under assessment, receiving a 60% package as opposed to a full package of your assessed need, that would suggest to me that people who could be receiving support that would prevent their frailty and their decline based on the domains that we know, we've heard already, as already discussed today, the Australian and New Zealand College of Geriatricians have referred to. Those people don't go away and their needs don't go away. They come back in the short to medium term needing more care and more expensive care.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you concerned that an individual who is requiring significantly high levels of care, and we heard today that somebody who has been assessed as needing a level 7 or a level 8 package may not be put on the high priority list. So, realistically, somebody who's assessed as a level 7 or level 8 package could be waiting 10 to 12 months to get a package. Is that something that is raising alarm bells within your agency?
We're receiving multiple stories like that. I think there's a couple of things. There's two dimensions to it, and I think you've referred to it earlier today, Senator Ruston. There's the urgency of priority, and then there's the level of assessment itself. I have concerns about the fact that we know that at the last point we heard about how many people were classified as urgent. I think it was 129 people were deemed urgent out of the over 100,000 people who'd undergone the assessment.
Yeah, what is urgent?
Well, and to me, I guess that signals what is our threshold for urgency. And it seems when we look at the rules, there are a couple of things that are beginning to appear to us. And again, this is something that we want to look further into. One is that it seems to be difficult to get enough points across the relative domains to hit that high threshold of urgency. Something that I want to look at a lot more deeply is about the flexibility of the point system. So, as I understand it, it's a bit of a waterfall system. So once you go through that first tier, which seems to have quite a strong weighting towards mobility, as opposed to some of the cognitive issues that we're hearing come up, that it's the mobility that seems to separate when you get through the algorithm where the differentials are. I would like to look a bit more deeply into that to understand where cognitive impairment sits on that. So, for example, a lot of the stories we're hearing about are people who may have decent mobility but struggle with their cognition or have neurodegenerative diseases. And so it would appear to us from the stories we're getting and from the details we're getting from the sector that people who have issues across a number of domains that may not be that deep seem to get the higher package, but those with, for example, very high levels of neurocognitive delay but might be okay on some of the areas might be missing out. So I'm trying to understand both the way in which need is determined and seems to be so many people seem to be falling through the cracks who you would anticipate to have very high needs, as well as how urgency is determined. And so I feel that I need to wait for the Ombudsman's investigation to bear some of that out as well.
Have you reviewed the impact of the 60% minimum?
So, as you'd be aware, we'll be making a submission to the Supported Home Inquiry, Senator. We're looking at that issue in some detail, and I can certainly speak more to that when I provide my statement in a couple of weeks. But we are looking at it, and I'm sure it will be a factor in our review, a big review of the Royal Commission's recommendations as well.
So do you, back to the algorithm assessment in relation to prioritisation and assessment need, do you think that the framework that is currently operating is transparent enough for people to really understand what's happening?
I think, as I mentioned, I'm struggling to understand how some of the results that are coming out. So to give you an example, I'm hearing from assessors who are leaving because they're concerned about the lack of human override in the results that are coming through. Again, this is, of course, stories that are coming to me. I'm hearing concerns from particular bodies that are suggesting that it's easier to go for residential aged care through the assessment system, and that may be driving higher results for people going to residential aged care, which is not a positive outcome. I wouldn't have thought if people don't need a residential aged care package. I don't want to say that that's a categorical finding. I'm just describing what I'm hearing. And then numerous cases are coming to me. For example, a gentleman who had Parkinson's disease was struggling with his medication support needs. His provider supported him to go through the assessment process to increase his medication support. On going through the assessment system, his medication support was halved. The provider supported the gentleman because he didn't have the self-efficacy or self-advocacy to keep applying for the reassessment. All the calls weren't being returned, the emails weren't being returned. Finally, the day that the agreement to a reassessment came through, the gentleman died the day before. And unfortunately, I have quite a few stories coming to me like that. And look, admittedly, you might say, well, these are stories, but they seem to be representative of a sample that potentially the Ombudsman's also hearing about, given the decision to review the IAT.
Yeah, it does certainly look like the process.
I wouldn't mind adding, just in the examination of that, Senator, that we have been looking a little bit at best practice around aged care assessment tools, and looking at things like the Interi, which, as you might be aware, is the tool that's used in New Zealand, and similar tools. The Interi family of tools, for example, is a decision support making tool as opposed to a final decision making tool. And I'd be really keen to understand. So when you talk about transparency, I don't think I'm clear on why that human override's missing it, and I do have very grave concerns about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. In relation to Commonwealth support, Commonwealth Home Support Program, do you believe that the government has got sufficient oversight of the program to actually understand who's receiving it and its delivery metrics?
So, Senator, you'd obviously be aware of the evidence and the submission I made to the inquiry into CHSP, where I raised those very concerns. I think that what's changed for me is having read the ANAO audit of CHSP, and essentially, as you'd be aware, that audit said that there is no robust evidence-based planning framework to match funding with demand, and these gaps pose risks to the transition to the new support at home program. So going back to the evidence I provided at that inquiry, CHSP is, and the ANAO audit showed this as well, that it's the core primary prevention program for the aged care system, and it's our opportunity to actually reduce demand. Like, if you want to talk about demand management and talk about really giving life to that promise in the act of ageing in place, this is one of the fundamental pillars of being able to achieve that. So I certainly don't have the expertise of ANAO, but I take it very seriously when they say that there's insufficient evidence-based planning to think about transitioning it into support at home.
Yeah, no, it was a sobering read. So in terms of residential aged care, what do you think currently are the most significant systematic risks that currently face the residential aged care sector?
There's probably a couple that I'm thinking about from a whole of system perspective. Obviously, we hear the concerns regularly that there's no way for the sector to achieve the number of beds required in residential aged care, even with more money. There's a feasibility question that sits over that. When you have a system where supply exceeds, I'll reverse that, where demand so seriously exceeds supply, is obviously vulnerable to providers being able to pick and choose residents, and that is a grave fear I have. As you'd also be aware, and I think we discussed at the last estimates, I still have concerns that restrictive practice reduction and elimination is not where it needs to be. But if I can just zoom out for a minute, the concerns we have about our ability to achieve the number of beds we need in residential aged care for the short, medium and long term, I think can seriously be mitigated by getting support at home and CHSP right.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, you made the comment about demand exceeding supply and providers picking and choosing, are you referring to the likelihood that providers will be forced into a situation where they're only taking non-supported residents because they're paying more?
That's right, and thinking about complexity, and obviously there have been some changes which have attempted to alter the ability to choose which level of complexity you're taking in a client, which is good. Yeah. But yes, I am mainly referring to the supported versus non-supported residents.
Okay. So I would take it from your evidence you've just given, you don't believe that the residential aged care sector has the capacity to meet demand into the future as it currently stands?
That would be how I hear it from the providers, absolutely. And I think that when I listen to the concerns of government, that there's a similar worry as well.
Yeah. So have you examined in any way the recommendations from the accommodation review in relation to the uplift in the supported residence accommodation supplement as to whether that actually will translate into the increase in bed supply that they're projecting, or is that not within your remit?
It is within our remit, and certainly I'm familiar with the recommendation talking about, but we haven't analysed it in any particular way at the moment. We're fairly focused on the support at home issues right at the minute, and some of the work program we've got on that we've referred to earlier, particularly around our economic analysis, but it is an issue on our radar for sure.
And in relation to the delivery of services in residential aged care, are you concerned that there is an increased focus on compliance, regulation and reporting away from the delivery of actual care to the individual because of the increased requirements in terms of reporting?
Yes, it is something I'm very seriously concerned about, Senator, and I would say that I'm hearing the focus on transactional matters of care, focus on tasks, outputs, minutes over some of those relational elements of care as a serious concern that's emerging, not just from the voices of older people themselves, but from staff as well who want to be able to spend more time with a person but feel like they have to move on. I'm hearing that from workers, I'm hearing it from management, and I suspect that would be an implementation issue because the Act really promises, under the definition of high quality care, it's promising that relational care, that valuing you as a human and what your meaning is in your ageing journey.
So finally, what is your view in relation to the mandated care minute targets in terms of how that actually reflects care outcomes for older Australians?
I would caution against an over-reliance on care minutes as they're strictly defined and look at what we're sacrificing in terms of what delivers meaning in a person's life. I reflect on what we heard from older people in residential aged care at the very beginning of my term. Things like, I value far more the fact that there's somebody to talk to me while I'm planting veggies in the veggie patch than I do about how long somebody's spending dressing my wound. It gets back to the fact that people fear they'll just be a physical shell to be cared for as opposed to a whole human if our focus is simply on care minutes as they're so strictly defined.
It was interesting earlier, there was a suggestion that there was an occupancy rate of, or a vacancy rate of 10% or an occupancy rate of 90% in residential aged care. We dug into that to some degree around the amount of time between somebody passing away and that room being reoccupied. It didn't seem to be taken into account in terms of demand, and there didn't also seem to be any accounting for people who had been assessed for residential aged care, and I'm going to go back to the hospital situation in a minute. So do you think that the department really has got have an accurate description and definition of demand or assessment of demand for residential aged care, both in terms of demand and occupancy and actually accounting and of the actual demand that there is there.
I haven't turned my mind specifically to whether the department does or doesn't have a firm view on those things. I guess my office has been really focused on whether there are a range of activities that the budget could be focused on that would reduce demand. So I haven't taken a view as to whether the department has got clarity or not, but it's obvious, I guess, that I'm still seeking a lot of answers.
Yeah, okay. Look, thank you very much. It's late. I won't keep you for much longer. So are we saying thank you tonight, or will we see you again?
You're going to be stuck with me on the 24th for an hour.
Oh, 24. Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll say goodbye to you then. Well, goodbye from estimates or interrogation. So thank you very much for your evidence. Can I have my hospital people back again?
I might
Chisholm.
just quickly, on behalf of the government, thank the Inspector General for her dedicated service over recent time as well, and wish you all the best for your future endeavours.
Senator Ruston, you were looking for...
The people from the hospitals again. I'm just sort of trying to get an understanding of this lack of understanding about how many people are in hospital beds. Okay. So, we know how many people are being assessed in hospital. I think it's in excess of 50,000 a year. What is so when somebody gets assessed in hospital as needing either residential or home care, one assumes that they're still in hospital because they are unable to go home from hospital until they're receiving a level of care to enable them to go home or to move out of hospital. What is the prioritisation that's placed on somebody? Do you have a different prioritisation, or is there usually an automatic prioritisation that they are high because they are in hospital and are unable to return to where they were before they were hospitalised?
I'll defer to my colleague Ms Snow on that. Yep.
Apologies, I thought we were talking about assessment prioritisation, but if we're talking about for supported home prioritisation...
No, we were talking about supported home prioritisation, aged care. So I'm just sort of understanding, you've got somebody who's in hospital, they're stabilised, but they're in hospital and they are unable to leave the hospital until they are able to receive aged care services in one form or the other. So I'm interested to understand what is the prioritisation that these people are getting for a package or an aged care place by virtue of the fact that they're in hospital and they can't go home unassisted.
So the 6 criteria don't consider whether or not someone is in hospital currently.
So you have no prioritisation if you're in hospital?
That's right.
Just to be clear, that's supported home. So for residential, you'll be assessed as being eligible for going to residential, and then it's a process of engaging with residential facilities to find a place that is available that is suitable for that person. That question of prioritisation is really a matter for those individual residential facilities as to whether they will take that person on.
And so do you know what is going on here? So you've made an assessment of somebody in hospital. They've either been assessed as needing a home care package or been assessed as needing residential care. What is your line of sight over those people from that point on? So do they just stay? I mean, I find it quite incredible. They're stuck in hospital. So let's go to the supported home package. So somebody's assessed as needing a supported home package to enable them to leave a hospital to go home. Now, currently, if you're in hospital, it's costing, I would imagine, thousands of dollars a day to keep somebody in hospital, and it's certainly not the best place for them. We know that clinically, if you don't require being in hospital, it's not the best place for you to be. So we've got somebody stuck in hospital for the need of actually getting a home care package. but there is no prioritisation placed on that person receiving a home care package any more than somebody who's been assessed in another environment.
That's right.
So it's no wonder the states and territories are losing their mind that they've got these people stuck in hospital and there's no prioritisation. Is prioritisation for people who are unable to go home without a package considered when you make?
So as we said before, we have funding to have a look at the prioritisation and how the tool and the algorithm is going. I think I acknowledge that we're talking about a specific cohort. However, I think it's important to also say that not every older person needs to be having a package or going into residential aged care when they're discharged from hospital. The other thing that in terms of a line of sight, we would agree with you that people need to be cared for well, and when they're ready to return home or go into care, that they're able to access that. Ms Garrett has a team of people on the ground that can work with providers and in hospital settings to assist when it's needed with older people and making that transition. So, we do, of course we care, and we do have some options to do that, also working with providers around availability in spaces when it is the older person's wish to do so, and they are assessed to go into residential aged care. And there's quite a bit of concerted effort that goes on in those settings.
Yeah. So does the algorithm know the person's in hospital?
I think we've explained this before, Senator. There are 6 points in the prioritisation algorithm. It doesn't include whether you're in hospital. It includes 6 items, and Ms Snow will correct me if I miss one, but one is whether you live alone. The second is whether you're at risk of homelessness. The third is whether you're a First Nations person. The fourth is clinical need requires urgent services, which is a double-weighted criteria. And cognitive impairment.
And the final one is waited more than 6 months for funding and lives in a remote area.
So that is the current prioritisation matrix, which is applied. It doesn't have a particular...
You'll excuse me for laughing. I don't think anybody in hospital can say they're living alone, can they?
No, but it's a question of where they would be when they went into that circumstance. So they go into a situation where they could be socially isolated.
But if somebody has been approved for discharge from hospital but have been assessed as being unable to return to where they were before they went into hospital, how is that not factored into the decision-making process? And I mean, the fact that the algorithm doesn't even take into account that they're in hospital. They wouldn't be in hospital if they were able to go home.
But sorry, if you're talking about someone who can't go home, then that's not a question of getting access to a supported home package. That's a question of getting access to a residential place.
But they may be able to go home with a supported home package. So, I mean,
you're making an assumption about, and 70%, I think we heard earlier in the day, get assessed for both at the same time. Fair chance that some of those in hospital are high up on that list. So they've got an assessment for a home care package, they've got an assessment for a residential place. It sounds like the weighting of the system is pushing people to the residential place, and we don't have to worry about them on the home care system anymore. And, you know, I was just listening to the Inspector General. It's difficult to get enough points to meet the threshold for assessment. And if you're in hospital, even though it's clinical is double points, but you're still going to meet everything else, it's designed not to give you a home care package at a high needs level. It sounds like it's designed that way. And this is, I think, why so many people are complaining about the way the system is working. It's a system design issue, which is providing the outcomes. If the Inspector General of Aged Care is saying it's difficult to get enough points to meet the threshold for a high needs package, surely that's ringing alarm bells somewhere. And I know that you're doing a review process, but...
No, but I just want to make the point that the 6 criteria we're talking about is the prioritisation, not the assessment for a high-level package. The assessment for a high-level package is the classification algorithm. But I accept the point that it is difficult. It's quite a high threshold to get the number of points to get into the urgent category.
So basically, you're leaving people in a hospital environment that's costing the taxpayers a fortune. It may not be costing the federal government a fortune because you've already done the deal on the NHRA, but the states and territories who are funding hospitals are being left basically funding inappropriate care because the person doesn't need hospital care, because your process of assessment doesn't take into account that they're stuck in a hospital until they need that care. So do you know what is the average length of time somebody who's been assessed as needing residential care and somebody who's been assessed as needing a home care package to enable them to be able to leave hospital? Do you know how long on average people stay in hospital, and do you know what the longest time people are spending in hospital before they're able to be discharged into the appropriate aged care system?
So in our recent reports, we've got the categorisation, and in terms of whether they're in hospital or not, we've got that, haven't we?
We've got the approvals, people who conclude assessments in hospital. In terms of what happens after that, that's something the single assessment system does not track.
Does the data from the states report how long somebody's in hospital while they're waiting for aged care services? I mean, you know roughly how many they would be reporting it relatively regularly, I would have thought. Does it also include a number of how long they've been waiting?
So the data that comes from the states and territories does include that. However, each state and territory collects the data differently, including...
And you're trying to get them to do it all the same.
That's right, including the status of clinically or medically ready for discharge. And so it's very much a moving feast, which is...
So, and you're trying to get common definitions.
Absolutely, so that we can get some robust data.
Well, it does, but it also means that we continue to rely on a lack of an agreed definition to avoid answering questions about how many older Australians are currently languishing in hospital beds that they don't need to be in, which I think is, it is a really important piece of information, because these people are people, they're not numbers, they're not statistics, they're not, points on a page. These are older Australians who are stuck in hospital because they have not got access to the appropriate aged care that they need, and you are relying on a lack of definition agreement between the states to even report on this. I mean, Chris Minns, as late as this week, said there were at least 800 people in New South Wales in hospital as we're speaking today. You know that these people are in hospital when you assess them, and then somehow you just don't worry about where they are thereafter. I mean, surely you must know if you assess somebody on, the 5th of May for needing a home care package level, whatever, and they don't actually get their home care package for, 3 months, and they're discharged from hospital to take up that home care package, you know how long they've been in hospital, because they're in hospital when you assess them and they're in hospital when they receive their package. I mean, do you not collect any of that data?
Not in that exact way. I mean, we are very keen and determined to get the definition. It's not an excuse, it's a fact. Once we have the definition, we can be reporting on it consistently. We can look at the drivers and the actions that each of the jurisdictions can take and work on this. We do care, and we do want to ensure that older people get the service that they need. But it is a fact that we do not have a common definition, and we are very actively working. Queensland Health is leading this work across Australia to get a definition for the health ministers to approve.
And we are not waiting for the definition to get on with the work with the states and territories to solve precisely the problem that you are talking about. To understand what is required, whether it's even more active case management, which we sometimes do, whether it's working about where are the, for example, residential aged care facilities, and whether we have to lean in planning processes or other things to close the gap in these areas. So we're working very closely with states and territories while the definitional work is going on to say what are the practical solutions on the way through on this question. But it is a genuinely difficult question. It has been a difficult question for a long period of time. I think the CMO commented on this earlier in a previous estimates. We haven't got a precise definition, but we don't dispute the fact the problem has got worse in recent times, and that we really have to lean into with a whole range of measures to try and solve this problem.
You've just reinforced the fact that the lack of definition seems to be what everyone's hiding behind to actually answer these really serious questions. But I think, excuse me, would you mind if I finish?
Well, I'm not going to let you just actually
No,
make
I was
things
about
up.
to ask a question if you wouldn't mind, Senator.
But that actually was misrepresenting what Mr Comley said.
I don't think it was, but
Well,
nonetheless...
he actually said the exact opposite of not making an excuse. He said the exact opposite of that.
Well, I don't agree with you, Minister, at all. The final question I'd ask is, what consideration has been given to making getting somebody out of hospital a priority?
Well, I think my point about we are moving on this, notwithstanding the definition, is it is a priority. And for example, the last health ministers meeting, health ministers agreed to the terms of reference for a secretary-level group to push on this discharge question as a matter of priority. So I'm co-chairing that group with Susan Pearce, the New South Wales Secretary of Health, to look at exactly what we can do, not just on older persons discharge, but people who have issues with the NDIS assistance or others that are not in the place they are clinically appropriate to be, which is once they are clinically able to be discharged, we all want to move them out of hospitals as quickly as possible. So we are taking it very seriously and leaning in heavily.
Why does the federal department need a state-agreed clinical definition of this? Why don't you make your own definition up as to what you think is appropriate in order for you to prioritise somebody who's in a hospital? I understand the counting piece and that the states count differently, and if we want the states to count, then you need a uniform definition. I do not understand why, as the federal department who has responsibility for the delivering of aged care services, and as you point out, NDIS services, why you need a uniform definition agreed to by all the states. Surely you only need a definition for your own purposes for the delivery of your own policy. So my question remains, why is the department not considering a set of criteria that would be enabled in the assessment process to prioritise older Australians who are stuck in hospital, who the assessor believes are unable to go home unless they are receiving additional aged care services? You do not need the states and territories to agree on a definition for you to be able to do that.
We do need a couple of things, Senator. We need that they provide most of the data, and so we have to know why is that being provided. We also need to understand what is both the... Can I just finish, please?
Let the official finish, Senator
We also need to understand...
your
We have to understand
speeches.
the barriers both within the hospital and outside the hospital that is a barrier to the discharge of those people. And some of those barriers, and I had this experience when I was on the New South Wales side of the table, are actually outside the health system. It can be things like setting up guardianship arrangements that have to be arranged before you can actually do the discharge, which is actually a justice system that you have to do. So we need to work with the states and territories in a collaborative way to find a way through. That's what we're intending to do. We do want to have a definition, but we're not stopping for the definition to work with the states and territories to work on how we can get discharged both through inside the hospital processes and things that we can move barriers outside the hospital.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody. We're at the end of our day. We will now release outcome 3. Thank you very much for bearing with us all day. I'd like to thank Hansard and Broadcasting and the Secretariat for all the very important work they do behind the scenes and for making sure we all get through the day. I have no doubt we will see a range of you again tomorrow morning. Thank you, and we will adjourn.
Bye.